chat. It is time for the Fat Electrician. It is time. And have a good night, rodent. Thank you for coming by. This one, again, something you guys suggested. The Percy Hobo Hobart. This is what your team said? Okay.
Bang, 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 bang.
So, let us see what he has to say. Let us finish off the night with a bang and a laugh. Big Dog, I've got a lot of suggestions to go through. It's gonna take time. Let's check it out.
When I started this video, I just wanted to know how the tanks made it onto the beaches at D-Day, and what I found instead is one of the greatest anti-hero stories of all time, and it rewrote my understanding of history. Today we're talking about the man that quite literally wrote the book on armored warfare, a World War I veteran that was forced into early retirement because his fellow officers didn't like him very much. But after German tanks rampaged through France and North Africa utilizing their new blitzkrieg tactic, Winston Churchill himself would call upon this man to leave retirement and go toe-to-toe with the infamous German tank commanders Erwin Rommel and Heinz Guderian. Ladies and gentlemen, the hero of D-Day that you've probably never heard of, Major General Sir Percy Cleghorn Stanley Hobart, aka Hobo. But
That's a hell of a name. That is a Chad name.
This is a really good one.
It sounds like it. Anybody who has that many names? Yeah, I know, the pause. Any man who has that many names in his name?
first, a word from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by Delete Me. Delete Me is an online subscription service. It's a very straightforward, simple business. You give them money, they get rid of your personal information off the internet. Okay, look, here's the deal. Somehow, some way, your personal information is on the internet. Your name, your spouse's name, your parents' name, your address, your last 5 addresses, your phone numbers, and all of your emails are all sitting in some data broker's bank, and they're selling that information for money. But the good news is that these data brokers are legally required to delete your information if you submit an opt-out request. And that's where Delete Me comes in. They will go to all the big data brokers and automatically submit opt-out requests on your behalf, and you don't have to do anything. And I know what you're thinking, because I thought the same thing. I don't want to give all my personal information to Delete Me either, because that just seems counterproductive. Okay, here's the thing with that. You don't have to give them all your private information. You can literally give them your name and your email address. You can give them more information if you want, but really all they need is your name and email, and then you come back a few days later and they just start asking you a bunch of yes or no questions. By using just your name and email, they'll search through all the data banks and figure out who you are, and they'll ask you a bunch of weird questions like, is this your dad? Is this your mom? Is that a relative? Is this your address? Did you used to live here? Did you grow up at this address? Is this your phone number? Is this your email? They know all of this information just by you giving them your name and email, using all the information that these data brokers have. And then you just let them know, yes, that's me, and then they will delete all that information for you. A couple days after that, they're going to send you a report. Here was mine. Over 70 data brokers had my information, and there were 489 listings where that information was for sale, and Delete Me submitted opt-out requests.
Alright, not to rain on his parade with his thing here. This don't matter. This doesn't matter, because you know what? Those data brokers are going to get your information 5 days later again anyway. That's the fact. Basically, the data brokers all have your information already. At this point, they're trying to sift through what is duplicates and what is not. So, I mean, at this point, stuff like we are living in an age where literally everything is scraping your data. Literally everything. Unless you are completely online free. Unless you literally are off the grid, and you've been so from the very beginning, you cannot do a thing to keep your data clean, keep your data out of data broker hands. It is literally being collected from every aspect of your life. There's nothing you can do about it, realistically speaking.
for all of them. Now, those data brokers are probably going to be able to get my information again, but Delete Me is constantly going to be searching for my info and automatically submitting the requests as soon as those listings pop up. Go check out Delete Me. I'll have a link and a discount code down below. Let's get back to the video.
Delete Me is not faster
Percy
than
Hobart
all
was
those
born
ad
in India in
brokers.
1885 and joined the British military in 1902. He would then go on to fight in World War I. While there, in typical anti-hero fashion, he made a name for himself as being extremely effective, but unorthodox and disobedient at the same time. Because of this, many of the other British officers don't really care for him. Despite that, he makes it through World War I, ends up earning himself a military cross, and then in 1919 he goes off to college. Graduates from college 4 years later in 1923, he then volunteers to be an officer in the Royal Tank Corps. Now, he volunteered because most people did not want this position. And that's because at this point in time, a lot of the high-ranking British officers didn't see the true potential that tanks and armored vehicles had. They simply viewed them as a single tool for trench warfare to get from one trench to the other. They didn't realize that one day it was going to replace cavalry. Percy Hobart, on the other hand, was a visionary and saw its true potential, and that's why he volunteered. Not only that, he was also very vocal about this opinion, and he would actually persuade a lot of the younger soldiers to believe the same thing, which honestly isn't a very hard sell. The new guy...
Yeah, big dog, you're not wrong. The guys that actually get shit done, the guys that actually get shit done, but not on their orders. If it was on their orders, they love him. If it was not on their orders, if it was the guys that took the initiative and did it themselves and basically got all the credit for themselves, they couldn't get the officers couldn't take any credit for it. Those were the ones that they hated. Absolutely.
joins the army and you're like, hey, quick question, did you want to ride a horse into battle or did you want to drive a fucking tank? Okay, everybody's picking a tank. And over time, his advocacy for change ends up making a lot of the old cavalry officers end up hating him because he's kind of trying to make them obsolete. And you have to remember, at this point in time, the British officer corps is very, very cliquey, like they're socialites and gentlemen, and they have to, you know, conduct themselves in a certain manner and all that BS. So when Hobart comes in and starts ruffling feathers, it upsets the entire officer corps, and they all pretty much hate him at this point. Despite that, he knows he's right, and
I like him already. You pissing off a bunch of officers? I like you already.
he just keeps working on pioneering new tactics and new applications for tanks. Now, one of the few legitimate concerns about having tanks on the battlefield at this point in time was that they were basically autonomous. And what I mean by that is, once the tank crew got their orders, hopped in.
Well, when I choose a horse or a tank, depends on the mission. Would depend upon the mission. Because if it's a mission where I need to be sneaky, obviously I don't want to take. If it's a mission where I'm just going in there and just blowing shit up, obviously I want to take. So it's very, the answer would be, it is mission dependent. As it should be. Not the, Shadowclaw's a tank. Not that sneaky.
The tank and took off. That was it, because tanks didn't have radios and stuff yet at this point in time. So once they left, you couldn't call them back, you couldn't change up the mission, they couldn't communicate with anybody outside of that tank. So Hobart comes out and he's like, well, hey, rather than not using tanks because they can't communicate, how about we just, I don't know, put some radios inside of them? So he fights tooth and nail for like a year to make that happen, gets radios put in all of his tanks, and then trains his guys how to run battle drills, being able to actually communicate with each other and the chain of command, and guess what? It works exactly how you would expect it to. I mean, this is the upside down ketchup bottle of the tank world. Like, somebody finally came out with this idea and everybody's like, how? How did I not come up with that $1 billion idea?
Yeah, this is the Julia Roberts mathematical calculation meme thing happening here on the top brass scale. Like, the simplest thing possible, they're overlooking it because, well, because this is the way we've always done it. This is why this is the way we've always done it doesn't fucking work. Why it leads to stagnation, stagnation leads to slow death. It breeds inefficiency and is slow death.
At this point, all the junior officers and lower enlisted are like, holy shit, this is awesome, and all the older, more experienced officers that already hated Hobart lose their shit because he's now actively making them look stupid.
What are those? You are wearing his merchandise!
So once that gets worked out,
James Woods was such a great Hades. He really was.
He starts developing legitimate battle strategies and drills and training his men on how to conduct tank warfare, how to integrate tanks with infantry, really laying the groundwork for what would become modern tank warfare. This goes on for a couple of years, and then in 1927, he ends up being a co-respondent in a divorce case. Now, I'll be honest, I had to Google what that meant, but apparently co-respondent is the fancy British officer polite way of saying Percy Hobart was banging somebody else's wife. Her name was Dorothea.
Uh-huh.
Field, and of course, she was another British officer's wife.
Naughty, naughty.
After that divorce is finalized, Dorothea and Percy get married pretty much immediately, and the rest of the officer corps now absolutely hates him, and they actively try to get him kicked out of the military because this is not gentlemanly behavior. They're not able to get it done. Hobart stays in the military and continues to develop and...
Yeah, that's the thing that was always prevalent in the British the British military, especially back during that time. They fixated on the quote-unquote gentlemanly behavior. Way too much. And it's, it worked in the 1800s when people actually gave a shit about that. But starting in the 1920s and moving forward, gentlemanly behavior didn't win wars. Yes, exactly, Ace. Wars are not won with gentlemanly behavior. And I think around this time is when they started figuring it the fuck out.
And refine armored warfare, and one of the things he starts to do is look back into history and see if there's any lessons that he can apply to tank warfare.
I saw that,
and one of the things that he hones in on is the Mongols. The Mongols were so successful because they utilized cavalry to strike deep into enemy territory at strategic points, weakening their entire empire. And Hobart says, what if I could do the same thing, but with tanks? And to anybody that knows a lot about history, that sounds an awful lot like the German Blitzkrieg tactic, and that's because it is. Yeah, the Germans didn't come up with the Blitzkrieg. Percy Hobart did.
Thank
Heinz
you, Ray.
German, the German tank commander that is the architect of the Blitzkrieg, is well known to have had every single paper that Percy Hobart published translated into German, and he kept that with him everywhere he went. Yeah, the infamous German tank commanders Rommel and Gedermann didn't revolutionize armored warfare. They just copied Hobart's homework. So if Percy Hobart is the actual...
Because of course they did. Because of course they did.
Actual genius behind the Blitzkrieg, why don't most people know that? Why does everybody give Germany credit, and why didn't the British use it first? Or at
I have a very simple answer for this. I'm gonna take a guess. I'm gonna take a guess, and Fat Electrician can tell me if I'm right. So why is he not credited? Number one, the British did not use the tactic because it was ungentlemanly. So that's why the British didn't use it. The Germans did. The Germans slaughtered a lot of fucking people. Thus, it made more headlines. Let us see if I'm right. I'm guessing that's the reason why people generally don't know this. Is because the British pulled some bullshit of like, no, we're not going to do that. It's not cricket. Whereas the Germans said, we don't fucking care. We're killing everybody. And they did. And it was very effective. So Germany used Blitzkrieg. It was very effective. And that's why it's in the history books.
the very least, know that it was a possibility when it was used against them in France when they got their asses beat in 6 weeks. That is because the British chain of command hated the man that came up with the Blitzkrieg, and for that reason, made the entire strategy a failure. In 1934, Britain conducted a large training exercise where Percy Hobart was going to be allowed to try out his new methods. If you
I'm going to back it up as say his catchphrase on here. Well, you guys probably already watched this video. Well, this is the first time I'm watching this. So they sabotaged him. Of course they sabotaged him, the little pricks.
training exercise where Percy Hobart was going to be allowed to try out his new methods. If you don't know, when you're conducting a large military training exercise, you have like Team A, Team B, and then you have the umpires, so to speak. You have the people making sure that both teams are doing the right things, saying, yeah, that works, no, that doesn't work, declaring who wins and who loses. The umpires conspired against Hobart because they were military officers and they didn't like him, and basically made his entire strategy fail. Fast forward 1937, Hobart is given command of the 1st Armored Division, Great Britain's first modern tank division. Because of this, a bunch of British officers promptly throw a bitch fit and try to get Hobart kicked out of the military again. It fails again, but the chain of command has to come up with a compromise, and that compromise is to take Hobart and send him down to Egypt, where he can take command of the 2nd Armored Division, which was basically, we're going to ship him halfway across the world and then pretend he doesn't exist. Out of sight, out of mind, right? So Hobart gets down to Egypt, and it is a complete shit show because tanks are effectively replacing cavalry at this point, so it's cavalry officers that are running tank divisions, and they have chosen to not read any of the literature or training material that he has spent the last decade developing, and they are operating tanks like they are dragoons. If you don't know, a dragoon is kind of like cavalry, except it's not. They ride in on horses, and then they dismount and go into battle on foot. And that's what the 2nd Armored Division is being trained to do. They roll up in the tank, and then the gunner and the loader stay in the tank while the rest of the crew gets out and fights like infantry.
What the fuck? That must be one of the most single-handedly stupid ideas I have ever heard in military history.
You are made of stupid.
That is so dumb. Shadowclaw, they would run the tanks into battle, stop, and only the gunner and I forget who the other person he said was would remain in the tank. Everyone else would abandon the tank and go fight on foot. Instead of fighting from the, I don't know, giant armored vehicle. Gunner loader. Thank you, Patrick. You have a giant armored vehicle with, I don't know, what size guns did those things have? 105s, 55s. God only knows what they were running back then. You have a tank with a main gun that can literally turn a man into paste. And you're going to jump off the tank and run at them with swords, pistols, and rifles. Once more for the cheap seats.
You are made of stupid.
While being a static target instead of a moving target, which is the entire point of being a fucking tank. The chain of command is effectively trying to do everything they can to make tanks look bad and ineffective, because by extension it makes Hobart look bad and ineffective. The running joke when Hobart gets there is that the Egyptian force is the Egyptian farce and the mobile division is the immobile division. But when Hobart shows up, he turns the entire thing around. Between 1930 and 1940, he trains this entire division how to actually conduct tank warfare, and they get super effective at it, and the men absolutely love him. Because Percy Hobart is not only a great teacher, but he actually wants every man under his command to understand what they are doing and why they are doing it. When at this point in time, many other officers don't care about that. They just want you to shut up and follow orders. But Percy Hobart wants you to know what you should be doing and why you should be doing it. That way, if the chain of command ever fails, you can make intelligent decisions regarding what needs to be done.
In short, Hobart is a great fucking leader, and someone who actually understands what it means to lead. This was a man that clearly understood what the concept of being a leader actually was. That being a leader wasn't just getting accolades and being told you're great without actually proving it. He actually got shit done, actually gave a shit about the people under his command, and wanted them to actually be the best instead of just claiming they were the best. Yeah, he was the only actual leader. I mean, from what Fat Electrician is saying, this is the only actual leader in the British military.
Percy Hobart treats his men like they're grown-ass men, and they absolutely love him for it. And because of that, he gains overwhelming support from the junior officers and enlisted men, and he becomes immensely popular.
No, don't like that.
And because of this...
Yeah, your dog? I'd say you're right. Yeah, until the US arrived with an actual military that knew what the fuck they were doing, that's why the British were getting pushed back. Because they were so stuck in their ways, they didn't adapt to the changing times and actually treat their soldiers like soldiers. They fucked around and found out.
They finally force him out of the military because they sent him down to Africa, intentionally sabotaged him, and yet again, he's managed to turn the entire situation around and turns it into a positive thing. So they just end up getting him fired. In 1940, he is forced into early retirement. On his final departure from Egypt, the men of the 2nd Armored Division lined the entire road to wish him farewell as their sign of how much they actually respected this man. So Percy goes back home, but still wanting to be involved in the military, he joins the Home Guard, which is like the British equivalent of the National Guard, and he gets busted down from Lieutenant General to Corporal, which if you don't know military ranks is like going from CEO to front desk receptionist. Not that I'm trying to talk bad about receptionists, but I'm trying to give you an accurate depiction of what a drastic change in authority this is. 5 months after Hobart's forced into retirement, the German military rolls into France with tanks, utilizing the Blitzkrieg tactic that Percy Hobart designed, and completely stomps the British and the French army in a matter of 6 weeks. Erwin Rommel then goes and proceeds to rampage through North Africa, and the only people that even kind of slow him down are Hobart's men of the 2nd Armored Division that is now known as the 7th Armored Division, aka the Desert Rats. At this point, Winston Churchill starts asking questions and
I like the name. I like the name.
realizes what his officer corps has done, and he personally calls Percy Hobart back into service and awards him the rank of Major General, at which point all of the officers throw a fit yet again, saying that he's 57 years old, he's too old to serve in the military, and they try to get him med boarded out. Winston Churchill yet again intervenes and stops the med board and issues this statement, quote, "The high commands of the army are not a club. It is my duty to make sure exceptionally able men, even though not popular with their military contemporaries, are not prevented from giving their services to the crown." Translation, quit being a bunch of catty bitches, we need this guy. By the time all that political BS gets done, Rommel is back in Europe, and he has been tasked with fortifying the Atlantic Wall, the German defense from Norway to Spain, in case the Allies should invade. Rommel reinforces it with 260,000
Yeah, well, I mean, from everything that we know of from history, Churchill did not give a fuck. Churchill was just the epitome of, I don't give a fuck. Shit's getting done. That's all you need to know. You know, when everybody thought that they knew best, and Churchill was like, I do not care. And that's it. And he got shit done.
men manning over 15,000 concrete bunkers and artillery positions. The entire thing is coated with barbed wire. It has anti-vehicle emplacements to prevent tanks and other vehicles from getting up the beach. And they lay over 200 million mines. And the man put in charge of figuring out how to penetrate those defenses is none other than Percy Hobart. He has re-entered the picture, and he knows that these kids have been stealing his homework. He comes in with the complete dad energy of, I taught you everything you know, but I didn't teach you everything I know. He takes command of the 79th Tank Regiment and gets to work immediately. It is now Major General Hobart and Erwin Rommel going toe-to-toe in a battle of wits that will determine the fate of the world. And obviously, we're going to handle this issue with tanks, which brings us to problem number one. How are we going to get tanks on the beach? How are we going to get a 70,000-pound hunk of metal with a gun from the boat through the water onto the beach? Obviously, we just got to make a tank float, and it can't be that hard because battleships float, right? I mean, those are big and heavy and made out of metal, so why can't we do the same thing with a tank? All you have to do is displace enough water, and bada bing, bada boom, you're floating. So all we got to do is increase the surface area of a tank. So they take a gigantic tube of wax canvas, wrap it around the tank, and then have inflatable tubes that when they inflate it, the canvas stands straight up, and basically it is a tank inside of a giant canvas tube. And then we'll just add a couple of little boat propellers on the back of the tank so it'll push itself through the water. Problem solved. Sounds stupid, works terrific. So now...
Interesting. Okay, I would have thought that there would be, based on the design, it didn't, it doesn't feel like it should work, but apparently it does. Because like, my first thought was like, okay, it's going through the water. Would you not have water leakage coming up through the underside of the tank? But I guess that wasn't an issue. I guess that ended up not being an issue, so did they? Okay. I mean, I guess it worked well enough. And if it works, it works. Hey, it's all about results.
Now that we've got the Sherman duplex drive amphibious tank figured out, the next problem, what is the beach made out of? Are the tanks going to get hung up and stuck? Because we can't have that happening either. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a submarine. We're going to send them out.
Oh, okay.
They're going to wait till night. Once night falls, the sailors are going to go ashore, gather up a bunch of the dirt from the beach, and figure out what it's made out of. It's made out of blue clay. Probably the worst possible thing because those tanks will for sure get stuck in clay. So obviously, problem number 2, how on earth are we going to get the tanks through all this blue clay? It would be really nice if we had a road. You know what? Fuck it. We're just going to bring our own road. Ladies and gentlemen, the bobbin. That is a Churchill tank with a gigantic spool of canvas that has metal rods inside of it that literally goes ahead first and lays down a road for all the other tanks to drive.
Oh my god, that is sick. That is fucking awesome. Where we're going, we don't need roads. That is fucking awesome. Holy shit. I am a little bit in awe of the ingenuity of this.
Drive on right up the beach. Again, it looks really silly, but it works super well. At this point, all the other people that hate Hobart are starting to make fun of him. They're starting to refer to these tanks as Hobart's funnies, but they have no idea how important these tanks are going to end up being. Hobart is over here actually trying to save the world by any means necessary. He realizes it doesn't matter how cool it looks, he just needs it to work, and he only needs it to work once. Meanwhile, all of his other contemporaries are worried about looking good while they do it. Okay?
And you know what? That ideology, I think, is still very prevalent today. I do. There is, even to this day, there is this crazy obsession with it has to look good to work good, when that's not the case. It doesn't, like, this encompasses a wide range of things. This is not just military, this is not just weapons, this is literally anything. It doesn't have to look good. If it gets the job done, it gets the job done. So many people are obsessed with, I need this thing done. Okay, here is thing to make this thing done. Yeah, but this thing is not pretty. I don't want it. It's still prevalent to this day. To this day, it's still prevalent. For whatever reason, we as a society cannot get over the need for something, the intrinsic need for something to look pretty in order for it to work well. And right here, Hobart and Fat Electrician are proving the exact opposite is true. And I wish people would come around and stop worrying so much about things looking pretty and just worry about things working.
Problem number 3, marching right up the beach. Now we have to worry about the mines and...
Oh, and by the way, you can probably blame Hollywood for this. Hollywood can take the lion's share of the blame for this, because everything in Hollywood, of course, looks pretty. All of the tech you see in Hollywood productions looks pretty. So the general public thinks It has to look pretty in order to be effective and do that job. And that's not reality. So yes, you can absolutely blame Hollywood for society's unaccountable desire that things must look pretty in order to work well. 100% you can blame Hollywood for that.
And the barbed wire. We can't be blowing the tracks off our tanks with mines. We need to clear the barbed wire for the men, and we don't want the barbed wire getting hung up in the tracks of the tank. What are we gonna do? Things are about to go from looking weird and silly to looking terrifying and awesome, because the plan for this is to eat the barbed wire and blow up the mines in front of us using the Sherman Crab, aka the flail tank. Okay, so just so we're all on the same.
Yes, he's right. That looks fucking terrifying, and it looks fucking awesome. That looks fucking awesome. I don't know who thinks that might look ugly or stupid. That would... You send that at the Germans, they would be shitting themselves. 'Cause that just looks terrifying.
Page. In theory, we have now figured out how to sail a fucking tank a mile through the ocean, build a road in front of us as we drive it up the beach, cut through barbed wire, and detonate mines. The only defensive structure left is the enormous concrete bunkers with Germans inside shooting machine guns and mortars. What are we going to do about them? Because normal tank guns aren't going to take those out effectively. Which is a pretty simple solution. If your gun isn't big enough, just get a bigger gun. Ladies and gentlemen, the petard. It is essentially a mortar that is the size of a propane tank, affectionately dubbed the flying dustbin.
You call that big?
Yeah, the thing's huge.
That explains a lot.
What is that supposed to mean?
You told me 8 inches.
And you told me you took installments.
I didn't know what that meant.
That's your problem.
God! They are so cute. They are so cute together.
Interrupting my history time. And if the flying dustbin doesn't work, this one will. The most terrifying of all of the creations, the crocodile, aka the flamethrower tank, pulling a armored trailer with 500 gallons of jungle jelly, capable of shooting flames over 250 yards. So if everything goes according
Schlammensässer. Yeet.
to plan so far, the enemy is either going to be dead or retreating. Here's the problem. Once the enemy starts retreating, they're also going to start blowing up all the bridges behind them, making it very hard to maneuver vehicles, especially tanks, across ravines, rivers, ditches, and so on. So, what are we going to do once they blow up the bridges? Fuck it, I guess we'll just bring a bridge from home, right? No, I'm not messing with you. Ladies and gentlemen,
Bridge layer.
bridge tank.
Yeah, the bridge layers. Yeah, we actually see this. This is probably the first inception of this. Bridge layer tanks are actually very common. Yeah, still around and modernized. Now, modern bridge layer tanks, instead of basically, it doesn't look like this one will do it. But the bridge layer tanks, like, I'll just use this particular tank just for diagramical demonstration. The bridge will actually fold up over the top of said tank, and the bridge itself folds in half. And then when it's in use, it basically lifts and extends the bridge out. The bridge will extend out to essentially look like this. It will lay a bridge over any gap that is necessary. The tanks will cross. The bridge layer will cross. It will pick up its bridge and fold it back up over the top of itself. That's still used in modern today. I'm guessing this may be the first. I'm guessing this is the first inception of it, perhaps. But it's still a concept that's used in modern military today.
Oh man, it went from this is kind of silly and there's no way that's gonna work to oh my god, that's terrifying to okay, now you guys are just showing off. And I know what you're thinking, that's great, but what if it's just a little tiny anti-tank ditch or a ravine, not something that really necessitates an entire bridge? Well, that's easy, ladies and gentlemen, the fascine, aka a bundle of sticks. So that's it. The plan is set. Hobart has accounted
Interesting
for
idea
absolutely
there.
everything, and this plan is for sure gonna work. But here's the thing. You've probably seen a bunch of movies or played a bunch of video games that incorporate the landing at Normandy on D-Day, and you've never seen any of this stuff. So why is that? That's because most movies and video games, like Saving Private Ryan, for example, take place on Omaha Beach, which was one of the American beaches, and the Americans didn't have access to all of Hobart's tanks. Why is that? Well, some people believe that the American leadership saw it and said that it was stupid, not gonna work, and they didn't want anything to do with them. However, that's a myth and it's completely untrue. Omar Bradley saw Hobart's inventions and requested all of them. Unfortunately, not enough could be made in time, and the only thing the American forces would be given for D-Day was the Sherman DD duplex drive amphibious tanks. And the reason that Hollywood focuses on Omaha Beach is because it's the most dramatic. It's the one beach of the 5 where absolutely everything went wrong. And believe it or not, one of the main things that went wrong was that the Sherman duplex drive tanks didn't make it. They got released too far off the beach and the seas were too rough, and a lot of them ended up sinking. Luckily, only 5 tankers drowned. The rest were able to escape and get picked back up by the boats. But it was a huge issue not having tanks on Omaha Beach, and it is part of the reason that Omaha was the deadliest beach on D-Day. If you pay attention and you know what you're looking for, it's even referenced in the Saving Private Ryan movie.
No armor has made it ashore. We got no DD tanks on the beach. Dog 1 is not open!
So just so we're all on the same page, the reason most people have never seen or heard about these things is because they weren't at Omaha Beach, and Hollywood focuses on Omaha Beach because it was the deadliest, most brutal battle. But the reason that it was the deadliest battle...
And thus, to stack on top of that, because it was the deadliest battle, it was also the most chaotic and therefore the most cinematic. Omaha Beach was crazy, and Hollywood, for Hollywood, that kind of absolute chaos in wartime is more cinematic than anything else. And that's why Omaha Beach is always featured, is because that chaos makes for great film.
Battle was quite literally in part due to the fact that Hobart's funnies weren't there to help the Allies fight. These tanks are quite literally a victim of their own success. To give you an example of how big of an impact they had on the other...
Actually, Raven, I can think of one. The name of it escapes me, but it was the Meg Ryan Denzel Washington movie. That was made by Desert Storm. That's the one movie I can think about that was made by Desert Storm. For the life of me, I can't remember its name. Yeah, there's, hang on. I actually want to look this up right now because it was a very good movie. And I believe it named Courage Under Fire. That's what it was. Courage Under Fire. It was actually a story about, briefly, because he's almost done. It was a movie about Denzel Washington was a tank commander who was memory serves, kind of disgraced, and he was asked to be an investigator for a medical chopper pilot commander who is going to be posthumously receiving the Medal of Honor because she had died in combat. And so he was conducting an investigation into what happened into the event that would lead to her being nominated for Medal of Honor. And it was a whole thing. I will not get into it, but that was Desert Storm. And it was a very popular movie. It was a very good movie too. Like I said, I watched it. I thought it was a very good movie. Very nice drama. And really kind of spoke about some of the shit that can happen in war on a small scale. If you haven't seen it, I do recommend watching it. It's a good movie. Yeah, Lou Diamond Phillips was in it, as was Matt Damon. Lou Diamond Phillips and Matt Damon were both in it as well. Major roles in it.
other beaches, the next deadliest beach after Omaha is Juneau, and it had less than half the casualties. But Hobart and the 79th Armored Division's contributions aren't done on D-Day. At this point, Hobart decides rather than keeping all of his men together as one unit, like pretty much every other type of armored unit did, he decided that he was going to split them up and attach them and their specialty tanks to all the other units of the Allied forces, essentially turning his tank division into the special forces of tanks. You need to clear some mines? Here's the crab. You need to scare some Germans? Here's the crocodile. By the end of World War II, the Germans were so scared of the crocodile flamethrower tank that they would start to surrender at the mere sight of it. The 79th Armored Division and Hobart's funnies fought all the way through the European theater, and when they finally came up to
no, Hurt Locker is post 9/11. Hurt Locker was more modern day, not Desert Storm.
Germany, the first Allied forces to cross the Rhine into Germany did it in Hobart's duplex drive Sherman tanks. Because Hobart's funnies and the 79th Armored Regiment were spread out amongst all the other units in the European theater, every time a unit did something special, credit was given to that unit, and the contributions by Hobart's men, and the Hobart funnies would go unnoticed and unrecognized. So in conclusion, this was the story of Major General Percy Hobart, the man that pioneered modern tank warfare, the man that trained the men that beat Rommel in North Africa, the actual inventor of the Blitzkrieg tactic, and one of the most important architects of D-Day and the Allied advance through Europe. In the pages of history, he is a victim of his own success because everywhere he wasn't was such a catastrophic shit show that it monopolized the spotlight, and everywhere he was, things went so smooth that it wasn't worth reporting, so he went unnoticed. When people think of tank warfare in World War II, way too many people think of Erwin Rommel and Heinz Guderian, when in reality they should be thinking of Percy Hobart, and I hope this video helps with that. Thanks for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch over thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang, out.
Excellent video. Excellent video. Remember, chats, Hobo, the true inventor of the Blitzkrieg.